So for those of you who don't know me, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Neena Rao, and I know Mirabai now for some years by having chanted with Krishna Das since 1996, and over the years have gradually met as much of the Neem Karoli Baba satsang as I can. And I know that his satsang is vast, and I continue to meet people that way, people like you who are actually joining after hearing about Maharaji through such devotees as Mirabai and Girija who met him in the person. I didn't, and I'm always interested to hear their stories, of their experiences with their guru. And actually, anybody who wants to tell stories with their guru, it's a big part of my practice. Actually, is hearing stories of the guru. So we've had a few conversations with Mirabai over, especially during the quarantine time. And I'll share all those links with you once we're finished with this. I'll send an email to everybody so you can hear. But recently I noticed that Mirabai had found some new stories in her journals that she hadn't remembered telling lately. So I wrote to her and I said, why don't we do another satsang together so that we can hear you more. And also Girija, I had the chance to see her when we were putting together a little welcome video for Krishnadas's screening of Windfall of Grace. And I thought, wow, I've met Larry before when I was in Kenchi, actually. I think it was in 2007. He had come with a couple of people, but Girija was not with him that time. And then I learned how much she was so involved with all the work she was doing, and she's friends with Mirabai. So, so Mirabai and I thought it'd be great to have Girija join us today. So I'm so happy to be with them. I'm going to open with just a little chant, and then I would love to introduce them to you. And then we'll spend the rest of our time together talking about our guru, the guru, and the path and practice, times in India, what we brought back to the West, and so forth. Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram. 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 So welcome everyone. I'd just like to introduce Mirabai and Girija formally. And so let me just read a little bit from their bio, but the rest of the time I'd like them to share about themselves. Mirabai teaches contemplative practices and develops programs through the application of contemplative principles and values. She is a founder and senior fellow at the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society. She directed the Seva Foundation Guatemala project and co-developed Search Inside Yourself for Google. She is a co-author with Ramdas of Walking Each Other Home and Compassion in Action. She is the host of a podcast on the Be Here Now network, which we will also be on, also named Walking Each Other Home. Her spiritual studies include 2 years in India with our teacher Neem Karoli Baba, meditation with Buddhist teachers Sri S.N. Goenka, Angarika Munindra, and IMS guiding teachers, and studies and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Gelek Rinpoche, Sokni Rinpoche, and others. And 5 years of intensive practice in Iyengar Yoga and 5 years of Aikido with Kanai Sensei. I love this. Welcome, Mirabai. And Girija, brilliant. We're so happy to have you here today. Girija received her doctorate in public health from the University of Michigan. Her work in India and Nepal helped identify gender as a key factor in preventing rural populations from using available eye health services. Along with her husband Larry, she was a co-founder of the Seva Foundation, whose projects have given back sight to nearly 4 million people. She is on the board of Camp Winner Rainbow and served as advisor to the Muslims Women Fund. She is trained as an Iyengar yoga instructor and is also a Buddhist practitioner. She currently is on the Marin County Commission on Aging and serves as a liaison to the Marin Interagency Disaster Coalition. Girija worked in the smallpox eradication program and lived in India for almost a decade and had the privilege of studying with many teachers, primarily Neem Karoli Baba and the 16th Karmapa. Thank you both so much for being here. It's such a joy. And I want to thank everybody for coming together in this virtual satsang and creating this sacred space for us to share in our experiences on the path. So I want to just start by prompting one question from the both of you so that we can start the conversation. Some of us know that Mirabai Bush met Maharaji in 1971 in February. Girija met him a little later, but they also met each other while they were in India. And they both got to India in very interesting ways. So I'm hoping that the two of you could just help us, give us a little timeline and also bridge your meeting and also how you met Maharaji and came together. And then we'll go from there with more stories. Unmute Mirabai.
Girija, why don't you start and tell your overland story?
Okay, well,
it's so good.
I'll give the short version, which
yeah, definitely.
how I met Mirabai. When Larry and I were first married and moved to San Francisco for his internship, during that year we heard Ramdas speak 3 Thursdays in a row at the Unitarian Church, which was an extraordinary experience. And then a year later, we found ourselves traveling overland with the Hog Farm Commune from London to Nepal. And when we entered India in March of that year, Ramdas went to American Express to And I think he ran into Wavy Gravy at the American Express. He'd gone to pick up the first box version of Be Here Now. And because of that meeting, we were invited to spend an evening together at the Kumar Gallery in New Delhi. And so that meant that the two buses of the 40 hog farmers and the bus of Maharaji and the devotees, who at that time were coming from Goenka courses in Bodh Gaya, had an evening together. And my recollection was that everyone in the satsang, including Mirabai, they were all wearing white, and they were all very holy and very pure. And there we were in our hog farm regalia, especially having coming overland, pretty grubby. And but we had a wonderful evening. I think we were doing Sufi dancing and some kind of glorious unity. And at some point, Wavy's brother-in-law, who had some mental issues, had decided Ramdas had insulted someone in the hog farm, and he proceeded to strangle Ramdas and try to hit the rock. And, you know, we were all horrified pulling this big guy off Ramdas, who was looking up at him with great love in his eyes. And that was basically how we met each other. But at that evening, Ramdas gave Wavy that box version of Be Here Now. And it was driving overland from Delhi to Kathmandu that I sat up at night reading Be Here Now, which was really had a profound effect on me. But where I first met Mirabai was in that evening in the gallery, where it was sort of like two different worlds of young hippies meeting. How do you remember it, Mirabai?
Mirabai, just 1 second before you start. I want to make sure, Girija, Serena, are you saying Girija's video stalled?
It is. She might be having some Wi-Fi issues. So as long as we can hear her, it would have to just be corrected on her end.
Okay. Do you think she should stop her video and start again? Or does that help sometimes?
You can try.
Girija, are you able to stop your video at the bottom and start it again?
Stop video.
Okay, now start it again.
Well, what? Let's
There
see.
you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see, when we all learn everything about Zoom and we have it down, that's when the pandemic is going to be over. Tell Larry that. Okay. Yeah, I remember that night really well. We had just come from Bodh Gaya, and we'd been meditating for 2 months or more. And many of us I'd never meditated before. And it was, you know, really powerful. We were sitting in silence every day from 5 in the morning till 9 or 10 at night, meditating. And we'd all gone through incredible changes there. And then when we left there on the bus, a bus we had chartered, was when we met Maharaji in Allahabad. And that story has been told many times. But so there we were. And then we went to Delhi to meet Swami Muktananda, and which was the original intention of the bus trip. We didn't know we were going to run into Maharaji just casually. And so we did an all-night Shiva chant, Om Namah Shivaya, with Swami Muktananda in Delhi, outdoors. It was amazing. And of course, by this time we were in a zone, you know, one thing after another. It was just incredible. We were floating. And then we were invited to this gathering party, and it was great. I mean, we hadn't read a book in all those months. We hadn't like looked at anything other than the monastery we were in and the nature around it, but certainly not art. It was all very well, I don't use this word casually, but psychedelic. You know, we're like, what is happening? And I remember that night, and when Josh's brother hit Ramdas on the head with this rock that he had carried from Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark had landed. Ramdas was so, he didn't miss a beat, you know. You could see he immediately thought, you know, is he okay? You know, and then went about like letting everybody know that Ramdas, he was fine. And to me, it was one of the first experiences in the world in which I saw, oh, all this practice and all these, you know, experiences we've been having really do make a difference. I mean, who does that when you get hit in the head with a rock? You know, I can still see it. So it was important. But what I loved, we were all in these long white dresses, basically, including the men from those years. And and you all were in like hippie costumes, and I remember somebody was dressed as Wonder Woman, and it was like such a worlds in collision, you know. And for me, it was like inner worlds in collision, because that's who I'd been before I got to Bodh. So it was an amazing night.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking about how Ramdas was that night and how it affected you. And the first time I saw Ramdas on my first day in Kenchi, when at your then husband John's invitation, I came up there, Ramdas was being really angry. And Ramdas was sitting in the back of the dining room with sunglasses on, glowering and not talking because he felt the Westerners are not using their time well. And my first darshan of Maharaji was him talking to Ramdas about his anger. So if you put those together, you can see that we were all work in progress.
Were. And also yesterday, I was talking to Larry yesterday on yet another Zoom, and which was a great conversation, and it'll be on my podcast coming up. But he was talking about coming overland, and he was talking about how Maharaji did say sub ek, and fast forward, then we were talking about, you know, how are we all going to change in the way that's necessary for us to go forward into the next 10 years and survive and thrive. And so we were talking about the common source, love, at the center of all religions. And he reminded me that you all, and the same was true for us, coming overland on these buses. We used to say it was the longest bus trip in the world, like London to Delhi was 2 or 3 months. But that was because we stopped all along the way, and people were so kind to us. People still loved America then, and around the world, and they were so kind to us, and they took us into their temples and their mosques and their homes. And it was in those years you went through Europe, and then Greece, and Greece, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. And every place was peaceful. Some of them were peaceful because they had tyrants at the head of government. But we could go anywhere, and people were kind to us, and they fed us. And so Larry was saying that he came out of that, and I realized I did too, with this sense of sub-ek, that, you know, it's all one. And as I was reading through my journal and parts of yours, I saw that came up over and over with Maharaji. You know, of course, we know that he talked about Jesus a lot, but he also talked about all other religions. One time, he held up a picture, or somebody did, of himself, and he said, "Who's that?" And someone said, "Maharaji," and he said, "No, Buddha." So anyhow, I think that that's important that we went through all that and then arrived with Maharaji, having gone through so many changes and openings. Um, yeah.
Before we, I just want to ask you both, because for those of us who started going to India more recently on pilgrimage, it was as easy as getting on a 14-hour nonstop plane and landing in Delhi and having a driver pick us up, and there we were, you know, at a hotel that we booked on the internet to stay near the ashram. So before you actually left, when you embarked on this journey to go to India, what would you say you were seeking? Like, what was already in your heart before you left? And I understand what you're saying about traveling and meeting people along the way and feeling that feeling of sabek, or all one. But even before you left, both of you, what was in your heart before you left? What were you looking for?
Well, when I first traveled, we were on the road just looking for adventures. It was a time of young people dropping out and traveling and exploring. I was in law school and I left all that behind and got on the buses, and it was more a sense of adventure. It was not necessarily being unhappy with United States, but just the lure of the East, the lure of traveling, the lure of something else, something different. But when I went back with Larry, um, the difference was he had sort of run out of pathways. You know, he was very involved in politics and people were becoming a little violent and talking about guns. And he knew that he couldn't do that, but he didn't know what he could do. And it was in that state of mind that he agreed to come to India. It was kind of know nothing mind.
Mm.
I was pretty clear that I wanted him to meet Maharaji, and Larry was in the state of, what have I got to lose?
Did you already have your doctorate in health at that point, Girija? Was that after? Did you?
Oh, that was much after.
Much after.
Yeah, Larry and I finished working in the smallpox program at Maharaji's direction. Then we came back to the States and got trained in the work we'd already been doing. So
Yeah.
Mm. I had been I was in the 4th year of my PhD, but I was also very involved in anti-war work and also in civil rights. I was running a program at the university for young African-American students who had come on. They had a big program on campus after Martin Luther King was killed. But I was really involved in that whole range of political and social action. And I felt more like, you know, I'd come to, it was starting to get violent in different ways. Kent State had happened. And we couldn't really teach because the police had taken over the campus. So it was like, I wanted to see if there was anywhere in the world where people were living a saner, more compassionate, wiser life. This just seemed like no way to live. And I first left with John, who became my husband later. We formed a commune in British Columbia with a number of other graduate students. And I was there for some time doing those commune things, living in teepees. And then we thought we would just go to India for a couple of months. I never thought I would stay as long as I did. And I wasn't really looking to learn meditation. I had never meditated. I just was looking for a different way of being in the world. And I found it.
So, Mirabai, you hadn't met Ramdas yet when you had gotten to India, whereas Girija had already heard him speak. And then you both landed up in India. And Mirabai, you both met each other, I believe, at S.N. Goenka's meditation center. So how did you both get there?
Well, how did we get to Goenka?
The meditation retreat, yeah.
Yeah, I had just arrived in India. told this story a lot, but I just arrived in India. It was this second day, and I met Sharon Salzberg on the street. In those days, there weren't that many Westerners wandering around Delhi like there were later on. And so we saw each other and we stopped and talked. And we'd been to the same school, but we didn't know each other there. And she told me there'd been a yoga conference, and Danny Goleman had been at it. I didn't know him yet, but he had told Sharon that he'd heard about this retreat for Westerners that Goenka was teaching. And so she told me, and we all ended up there together. And of course, Ramdas was there too. And I had never even, well, we came from Afghanistan to India in a different bus because ours broke down. And on that bus, we met two people, Dwarka and Tenny, who had been living at Lama Foundation and had been, they worked on the artwork for Be Here Now, the brown pages. And so they were close to Ramdas, and they told me about him. Krishna already had met him because some years before, when Ramdas was doing his lecturing about psychedelics, he had come to Buffalo and he gave Krishna his first psychedelic, whatever it was. And so that's not something you easily forget. So Krishna really wanted to see him, meet with him, or, you know, meet him again. So that's how I got to Bodh Gaya.
So the actual time that she and I met was my very first Goenka course. And that probably for Mirabai, it must have been, they probably had been with Maharaji and he sent them all away and probably said, well, I'll take a meditation course. So that's how we met. Goenka had all the women stay in one big room and all the men in another big room. And I guess we weren't in total silence. We found a way to talk, and that's how we met. And then after the meditation course, we traveled around Rajasthan for about a week together. We had, we were together in a way that just seemed so natural, I guess.
Well, I'll add to that I got hepatitis on that trip, hepatitis A, which many of us got in India, just from drinking. I realized later I'd been drinking water that water buffaloes had been bathing in. What was I thinking? I mean, those were, as I said, we were in pretty much of an altered state a lot of the time. So, but I was back in Nainital when it came on, and I discovered, and I remember Krishna was thinking, we'll leave here now. We've been with Maharaji for a little while. I forget the sequence, but we should leave now. He wanted to go somewhere in India that he wanted to visit. And I wanted to stay. And, but we were going to leave. And I remember one day I bent down, I was washing my clothes in a pail, and I bent down to wring it out, and I couldn't do it. It was just, it seemed like the hardest thing in the world to do, to wring out this piece of cloth. And then I said, you know, I don't really feel good. And then someone looked at me, and of course my eyes were bright yellow. And so I went to that hospital up above Nainital, in the hills over Nainital. I don't know if it was an old British hospital. There was nobody in it. I was the only patient, I think. And the doctor was there like once or twice when I was there, but I would go into his office and I'd research books on hepatitis. And then I would take care of myself. And when I came down from there, they brought me down in a dandy, you know, like a what do you call it? What do you call it when you put people
like
on it?
Yeah,
it's a palanquin, yeah. And which was totally fun. And I was carried down by, you know, eight bearers, and but I couldn't walk. So then of course we had to stay, and that's how I got to stay with Maharaji that time. It's all connected.
So I'm wondering if we can just go back for just a little bit, because Mirabai, there's some people here who haven't heard your story many times, and are asking, when was it that you met Maharaji the first time? And what was it like? And the same for Girija, when Girija got there too. So if you could both share that story. What was it like, your first encounter with Maharaji?
Well, as I said, we left Bodh Gaya after all these meditation courses, and we were going to Delhi, and Ramdas was going to Delhi. And by that time, in between courses, we had gotten to know each other some, and we wanted to stay together. And so a group of us, not everybody, but a group of us, about 20, we got back on this bus that I had met Dwarka and Tenny on. And he agreed to take us to Delhi. And on the way, we went through Allahabad. Danny wanted us to go there because it was the site of the Kumbh Mela that year, although it was over. But he wanted us to see where the rivers came together, the holy space. And so we went to Allahabad. And as we drove in, and we had, Girija, I think he hadn't picked up Be Here Now at American Express then, because Ramdas had the copy when we were in the monastery in Bodh Gaya. And everybody had read it. And as I said, I didn't know Ramdas before. So I was like the last person to get to read it. I was on the bus. And I was just reading the part about Maharaji, where Ramdas says, don't even try to look for him. It's impossible. You're never going to find him. I can't find him. But then but I kept reading about Maharaji, and I thought Goenka had told us, he warned us about gurus. In his tradition, you need a spiritual friend who's a little further ahead on the path, who can teach you the practice and help you move along. But he was wary of gurus. And of course, there were all kinds of stories of abuse by gurus and so on. So I hadn't come to India for a guru at all. So I thought, well, I agree with Goenka, but this person sounds really amazing. But I'm happy for Ramdas, And just at about that moment, Rameshwar Das looked out the window of the bus and said, there's Maharaji. What? And so the bus came to a screeching halt. The doors opened. Everybody just piled off the bus. Ramdas was crying. Everyone was so happy. And I was one of the last people off. I might have been the last person off. And I walked down the steps. I'd been a, intellectual graduate student before getting to India. And a New Yorker. I came down those steps and I saw Maharaji, and just everything changed. I never know how to explain it, I felt like in the meditation courses, I had glimpsed a little of who we could be if we really committed our lives to waking up. But just, glimpses. And when I saw Maharaji, it felt like he was the total embodiment of that, and just glowing. And I was just like, oh my God, it's real. And I just, and I never thought I'd bow to anybody. And I was also, it was a time of, feminist awakening. I just went down at his feet, and just everything changed after that. Yeah.
So my first meeting of Maharaji, what I described earlier, was that Ramdas was being very angry. The first time I met him in India, he was in the hotel not talking to anybody. And when he went to Kentri the next morning, That was the first time I saw Maharaji from a distance, but he called Ramdas up to him, and all the conversation was about anger and giving up anger. And he told Ramdas, if you try to give up anger, I'll help you. You try and I'll do the rest. And there was so much love and so much compassion, and Maharaji calling for milk, to have Ramdas drink milk to cool the anger. And I think I was sort of in the back watching it like a movie almost. So I was touched not only by Maharaji's presence, but the compassion he had for his students, for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's not a coincidence that so many of us had sat with Goenka before we met Maharaji. I think it allowed us to quiet our minds just a little bit before we
Mm-hmm.
can appreciate or feel who Maharaji was.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, I owe a great debt to Goenka, because I'm not sure without his training, I could have really had the sense and the peace, quiet in mind to really be with Neem Karoli Baba.
Yeah. You know what I want to do before the next question is I want to just, here's what happened. This is my journal. It's 50 years old. The pages are just like parchment now. They're just, falling apart. But I didn't, Girija kept a diary in which she.
So I have to show you. Here's mine.
No.
Pages are literally falling apart. 1971. Yeah.
But I mostly kept, I didn't like write out any paragraphs of what was happening, or so I didn't have that feeling that you did, like how much happened in one day, because I didn't do it that way. But I just, there are all these little, here's all these little stickies I put on here, because I just put like one-liners kind of, and that would happen. So I just want to read you some of them so that you get an idea of what it was like. Maharaji to Jeff, that's Krishnadas, as I was pranaming to Maharaji. All women are mothers. She is your mother. I held that over him for years. He said, the householder path is the most difficult. But if you're in it, it's your dharma to work with it. He said to me another time, you are mother. You are my mother. Ciao. Go away. Give up attachment to money. The whole universe is yours. You don't need to possess anything. Another time he said, saints and birds don't collect. And he would tease us a lot about money. I didn't know before Girija that he said you made more money than Larry, or because because that's what he asked me once, like, how much did I make in America? And then he asked Krishna how much he made, and I made somewhat more than Krishna did. I mean, I was just a graduate student doing running this program. But then when Indians would come and be there, he loved to do that. He'd say, how much money do you make in America to me? And then he'd say it to Krishna, and he'd say, see, he'd say, he had all these examples of the way we were so different. That was one of them. But he always said, money has no value.
He asked me how much money I made, and he would always ask people how much money they made.
Yeah.
Obscure.
Why do you think that so when he asked you about how much money you each made, like, what do you think, what was your teaching from that when he asked those questions? What do you think that was?
Well, sometimes I think he liked to show us off to the Indians. And look, look, come all this way, and they used to make all this money, and they've come here, and what are you doing? In sort of a funny way. I don't know why he asked that. He talked a lot about not needing money, and it's important that the audience know that Maharaji never took a penny from any of us.
Mm-hmm.
He us. He closed us.
Yeah.
We saved it. We could never give him money, ever.
Mm-mm. Nope. Here he says, you constructed a house in America. We had built a Bucky Fuller dome on the commune before leaving. Yes, Maharaji, a dome. We built it together. He said, build a room for me. I'll come and live in it. What a thought. Oh, here's where he said, love is more powerful than electricity. I will go to America by the power of love. Here he said, an Indian devotee looked around at all of us and said, the men and women should sit separately. Maharaji said, they don't understand English. Remember, he would call us English. Well, these are, well, you should only say good about others. Don't disturb anyone's heart. Everyone is God. Everything is God. Everyone is your guru. All beings are reflections of my face. This for you, Nina. Harinam said, Maharaji is Antaryami. Maharaji smiled, happy. Rukmini asked if someone else was also a knower of the heart. Nay. Well, maybe yes, he said, maybe no. Only say good about others. And he said, saints and birds don't collect. Saints should give away all that they have. Oh, this was funny. And Ravidas is one of the people who was with us. He had tied up, he was wearing a lungi or a dhoti, I guess. And so he had tied up some sweets in the corner of it, and then, the way you can tie the thing around it. And, I guess was saving them, hoarding this little bit of sweets. And when Maharaji said that, he carefully unwrapped the thing and then gave all the sweets away. And one more. Oh, yeah. When we were in India for the Pakistani-Indian War that was 1971 or 2.
That's what I was going to read as well.
Yeah, and we went, your part's great about going to see, I guess it was at the Sony's house, Maharaji was there. Yeah. But Krishna said to Maharaji then, what should we be learning from being in this country during a war? And Maharaji said, learn to be peaceful.
Then he said, it's God's various way of arranging things.
Right.
And I wish I knew how to say that in Hindi. That was the last time I saw him before I left to bring Larry back, because India was at war and there was a blackout in Delhi, and Maharaji was just talking about being peaceful. And oftentimes, in the worst of the last 4 years, I would think about Maharaji's words that it was God's various way of arranging things. And sometimes it was really a stretch, personally, to think of it.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's true. It is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reading Being Ramdas, and or rather listening to it. So he explains everything in so much detail about many of the things that you're talking about, actually, the Kumar Gallery incident, and him talking about also, having the teaching of love everyone that Maharaji had asked him to do. And he was able to actually have that reaction to the person who was hitting him with the stone. And he said, like, for the first time, I felt like I'd actually been able to affect some of these teachings myself in my own behavior. I understood the love everyone. He says that beautifully in that. And about the what you were saying before, Girija, about when you came and Maharaji was talking to him about anger. I think that was the time when he had taken the plate of food and pushed it in the person's face because everybody had left the hotel without him, or he was angry already on that day. That was the time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He felt that we as Westerners were not using our time well with Maharaji. And Maharaji was often said that we Westerners did the 5-limb yoga. And Mira's going to have to help me remember all 5 limbs. The 5 limbs of yoga that we did were drinking tea, wandering about, gossiping, sleeping, and probably eating.
Yeah.
He said that was our yoga. That's what you Westerners did. And basically, that was true around Maharaji. But Ramdas felt we were not serious enough, and he was angry. But then he gave that up.
But Maharaji never gave you any specific practices to do even when you were there, right? It was all just sort of sitting around him and receiving whatever it was that he was transmitting to you. So what was that like when you were with him?
Maharaji was always trying to get rid of the Westerners. So he would send us off to sing the Hanuman Chalisa, or if it was Sunday, he would send us off to go study the Bible and have Ramdas read the Aquarian Gospel. And if anyone was giving any teachings in Delhi, he would send us all off. Go see Sai Baba, go see Muktananda. He was like, so part of the time was that there were all these Westerners who just wanted to be near him and hear everything he said. And probably he wanted to have a little peace and quiet. So some of the time he was just kind of sending us off, but being in his presence in the ashram was itself so powerful. So whether we were physically with him or not, his presence was so strong. And he gave us lots of instructions. You know, we put together something called a cookbook with all of the various teachings. There was a time when he gave very specific things about how to behave, but in the end, his real teachings were those essential ones that Ramdas talks so much about loving everyone and seeing God in everyone and not to be attached. And the last thing, when he sent Larry off into Delhi to finally work for the smallpox program, and it was like a 3-month process of trying to get permission to go, and I really wanted to stay, and Maharaji said, no, you have to go be with the doctor. So that was my instruction.
You know, I said I wouldn't look at the chat, but I did.
Okay.
And
good, you saved me from having to tell you, so go ahead.
Always tell the truth. That's what he told us.
Yeah.
But you'll have to help Girija. A couple of people want to know what Maharaji said about Jesus. And I remember he said that he loved Jesus. He said Jesus never died because...
Yeah, there's one time where he said Jesus lost himself in love. In my little note, he lost himself in love. And then my notes say, and then that faraway look.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. That was, I think, Krishnadas or somebody, or Ramdas said, how should we meditate? This is related to what you asked, Nina. And he said, you should meditate like Christ, I think. And then someone said, well, how is that? And then he said he lost himself in love. And then, and then Maharaji was just like, looking into the big love. Yeah. And he said, I love Christmas. I go to church on Christmas and light candles. You say that one time? But he mentioned Jesus often.
He talked a lot about you. Of course, you have to remember that he didn't know that many of the satsang were not Christians.
I know. It was very amusing, actually.
Here it is. He says Christ and Krishna are the same.
Right.
Going on and on about love people like Christ did. Remember the people who are one with God like Christ. Christ has never died. I talked about Jesus a lot, really a lot. And it may have been that he spent time in Allahabad, you know, when he was sort of or where there's a big colonial presence and lots of churches. In fact, the day he died, Maharaji said, "I'm leaving Central Jail." And I remember driving down the street in Lucknow, and I looked up, and it said Central Jail that the British had built. So I think all these images of church and jail were from his time spending, you know, in the 30s and 40s, you know, colonial India.
Yeah. Wow. I hope that helps.
We have another question here. Would you please describe the quality of Maharaji's love and how he made you feel during a darshan, which stands out in your memory? What has that feeling inspired you to do or become?
I mean, everything I've done since then came out of the experience of being with him. That he loved us. That it was, Ramdas has described it well, but you know, unconditional love in sense of absolute acceptance, and also kindness. Like I came upon something in my journal that said, I went to him and I was crying, and he said, you should stay with satsang. And then I went over to where everybody else was, you know, taking naps and so on. And then I laid down, and just then Krishnadas and I think Lakshman each got up and put a blanket over me. And I can still remember the feeling of the blanket kind of fluttering down onto my body, and this feeling that of being taken care of. And that there was a way in which Maharaji was taking care. And, you know, over the years since then, I mean, so many things happened, but there were times, a number of times, many times, when I would, you know, one time when I went back to India and sat at his tucket, but also just at other random times, I'd look at him and, or a picture, and it would be after some major thing had happened in my life, and he would be saying, see, you know, you're being taken care of, you are loved, you're appreciated, you are accepted, and you are being taken care of. And that allowed me to do everything I did after that, you know, gave me tremendous energy and ability to take risks. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, for me, the experience of Maharaji's love, it was so warm and so strong and so filled with humor. I mean, it seemed that we were laughing all the time, that everything was that he said was funny. When he wasn't, you know, being totally serious or absorbed, he was chatting and joking. And I think that love that he had for everyone, as Mirabai said, was that attachment for everybody, kind of imbued everything. But at the same time, when we were there, we were regular people, and there was a lot of jealousy and competition in the satsang. It's easy to pretend it was all some sort of ocean of bliss, but you know, a lot of like, who gets to sit in the front, and why is he always talking to that person? He never talks to me, and I'm going to leave. So at the same, there were all these memories of how we were and sort of insecurities, but Maharaji was like this constant flow of love behind all that. And as Mira said, over the years, and it's been 50 years that we've known each other, our lives have gone up and down in so many different directions, but underneath it all, It's Maharaji.
Yeah. And the things he told us, he didn't tell us much. Let's just say love everyone and serve everyone for starters. That was enough. At each stage or change in my life, I'd check in, in this circumstance, how do I love everyone? How do I serve everyone? And it kept changing all the time. But, it's just, I was just on a call with somebody before this, and I realized that I've had a series of conversations recently with people about how are we going to come out of this COVID time, and how are we going to create what should we be doing to create a world that in which we can survive and thrive going forward. And now that we've recognized a lot of the things that weren't very wholesome in the world we've been living in, and everyone I talk to, like people in public health, people in the arts, like it comes down to love. This friend who taught, he was teaching at University of Michigan in Flint during the time was the water crisis there, and he was saying, it's all comes down to love. If the people who made those decisions had loved those children, even if they didn't know them, if they had love for those children, that would never have happened. If there really was love in this culture for everyone, then we wouldn't be seeing these big discrepancies between white communities and communities of color in terms of COVID and deaths from COVID. That it really, people say, oh, how can you, how do you just love in the, when you're out in the hard world? It turns out it really is the most important thing. And it can get translated in so many different circumstances. That has, yeah. And it was because of the way he loved us that he could say that to us, and we could genuinely try to do it when we came back here.
So I wanted to just comment on one other part of Maharaji's life, that he was not only a teacher to us and a guru to so many, but he was a householder who was married and had 3 children. And that Larry and I were fortunate enough to actually meet his kids and live near them, and understood how he was as a father and how he fulfilled every obligation that a father had to fill so beautifully and so impeccably. I mean, isn't that amazing that he did? None of us knew about that until he died, but he really showed both sides of how to be in the world as a householder and also to try to be a teacher to others.
Yeah, they talked about that in Windfall of Grace in the movie. Many people were saying that the people in his family actually felt that he was never really away. He was so present for them a lot of the time. Actually, Girija wasn't one of his daughter's name is Girija.
Yeah, and she and I have met, and when Larry sent us in the smallpox program, we were working in it, and the Maharaji died, and the first posting they sent us was to Bhopal, and we ended up living a block away from Maharaji's older son. And so they kind of took care of us, and Maharaji's grandchildren were there. And so I was with them for months and months. And then we had to go to Dhanbad and Bihar because there was smallpox, and that's where Maharaji's daughter lived. And so first meeting them was first a little awkward. You sort of like, I couldn't imagine what they thought of us. But they just loved hearing stories about Maharaji, and Girija came to the States. We got to meet her. She was just so happy. And I remember calling Ramdas and putting her on speakerphone so he could, she just wanted to hear stories about Maharaji. So a lot of love now. And now the ties between the Westerners and Maharaji's family have gotten very close, I think. So it's very sweet for me to think about that.
Yeah, I met Girija in Kenchi actually, like a few years ago. She had come to see Siddhima, actually. She was there. And I didn't know her, right? And she was walking across the bridge and she greeted me and she was so welcoming and so warm. And where are you from? And she wanted to know everything. It was beautiful to really meet her in that way. And I couldn't believe I was meeting Maharaji's daughter. It felt like such a great blessing for that to occur. So let me just look at the questions here. And this is an interesting, when I was reading Being Ramdas, Mirabai, Ramdas talks about having upagurus, the gurus who are your teachers along the way, like Swami Muktananda and various others that he met, like Anandamayi Ma and so forth. So the question here is, how is it different? And perhaps you've also had teachers this way. How is it different when you went to be with other gurus you mentioned? How is it different than your time with Maharaji?
I experienced everyone else as a teacher, and they taught, extraordinary things, mostly practices. But it was something like completely different with Maharaji. It was just this, as I said, just like he changed my whole sense of what one could be in a human body in a lifetime, what we were here for and what we could possibly become. Not that we thought we were going to become Maharaji, but that there was kind of no limit to like how much you could embody love and compassion and wisdom. And so for me, all the other teachers I was with, and I was grateful to all of them. They all taught me different things, but mostly practices that just like kept it going. Those practices that bring us home to center, so that we're better able to love and better able to appreciate who Maharaji was. Yeah.
So when I would tell other teachers that I was a student of Neem Karoli Baba, they were always so appreciative. When Maharaji died, I went to see the 16th Karmapa in Delhi. And at that time, and again, you have to visualize living in India, everybody's talking about reincarnations and saints, and we were all waiting for Maharaji to be reborn immediately so that the Westerners would have the guru back. And the first thing I asked the Karmapa was, well, when will Neem Karoli Baba get reborn? And he sort of said, well, why should he, what's the rush? Doesn't he need some time off? And when I talked, and he just said that Maharaji was, a Mahasiddha. And he told us, when you are taking part in all these long Tibetan rituals, if you don't understand them, it doesn't matter. Think of your guru with devotion, and you'll get the essence of all these practices. And so that's sort of what I've carried with me over the years, is taking the essence of what a teacher has to offer as a gift from Maharaji. What grace to be sent to have all these teachers around us. And I would say one of the boons of COVID is that all of us can access wonderful teachers online in a way that we never could have before. So I consider that a great gift. And I think every time I would meet a teacher, I would think it's like a little prasad from Maharaji.
Agreed. That's beautiful. Thank you, Girija. Here's a question asking, did Maharaji speak English? What was the day like with him? Did you all have formal times of sitting with him? Did you sing with him? Give us a picture of how it was.
Maharaji spoke his first language was Pahari, you know, it was like a dialect of Hindi. And he understood some words. He would, I'm trying to think of what words he used to say.
He said course when he sent somebody off to Goenka. People would come there thinking, well, I've come to India, I'm looking for a teacher, I want to learn yoga, meditation. And so that, you know, if it's somebody who wanted to learn meditation, he'd point to them and say, course. Because Goenka taught in courses.
Very Dr. America. I think Maharaji understood a lot more than he let on. And the days were, when we were living in Nainital, we would take the bus, you know, we'd stop and buy prasad or sweets and go to the ashram and lay them out on his table and wait for him to come out. And then he would give darshan, he would give us tea, he would send us to the upper part of the ashram where we would continue the 5-limb yoga and drink tea and take long naps. I cannot, never, at no other time in my life did I ever take naps in a room with like 20 other people. Maharaji would send us up, he would feed us, and we would all take a nap. We'd wash our clothes, we'd stay in the ashram for the whole day. And then he would call us down in the afternoon, give us tea, and then we would take the bus home. That was a good day when you got to be there, you know, from morning to night. But he had this whole other side of his life that we never saw with Siddhima, who later on became a teacher to so many. You never saw them. He went behind a certain door, that's where he lived, that's where they fed him. We did not, as Westerners, see that part of his life. Is that about it, Mirabai?
Yeah, it was.
Being fed fruit, being fed lunch, taking naps, waiting for him to come out.
Yeah, yes. And then, so we'd be there and then things would happen and he'd leave or he'd send us away. He sent us to many places. And it was during the war that he sent us to Puri. But I don't think you went there, Girija. But when I went through my journal, I found this. So when we were away from him, we were still all totally focused on him and we were all staying together in different places. And I just felt, this is a couple of paragraphs, I'll read it to you. I wrote this based on what was in the journal. This is written a little later. By 1972, I had been in India for more than a year. Maharaji had sent us to Puri, which is on the Bay of Bengal, beautiful place. And a whole group of us were living in a house there. It was a beach house that had been owned by a Maharaja of Puri, who at one time was carried about in a carriage drawn by zebras. But he'd been bankrupted by the dowries of his 9 daughters. He had 9 daughters, no sons. Now we were living there, swimming and eating rice and lentils distributed each day by the great Juggernaut temple. I am walking on the wet sand, watching my footprints disappear in the surf. I'm leaving no trace. Ramdas is here too, and Krishna. I'm wearing floppy Indian cotton pajamas wet around my ankles. I feel small inside them. I move my arms up and down like a gull and skip down the beach. We are bums, Ramdas calls out. I call back to the others, what? We are bums, he says. We don't do any work. We don't contribute anything. We're bums. When Ramdas says this preposterous thing, I feel happy, completely right. How can this be right? I didn't realize then how important it was because we had both been like nonstop doing in our former lives. I didn't realize how important it was to not do during our time in India, what Girija is describing, how insight was growing that would help form everything that came after. It was about how non-doing can make the doing worth doing and how our constant busyness gets in the way of that. About taking risks that don't feel like risks because they feel right, in line with that inner compass. And finally, how we cannot do while we're doing if we're not attached to the outcomes. I didn't understand that then, but it felt great. And it also felt like we were getting away with something that was really fun, like kids. I knew that this was important for Ramdas also. He'd always been ultimately responsible, doing what his family wanted until the acid days at Harvard. With all of us, he was still being responsible, helping us understand these Eastern teachings in the context of our Western education. Being bums that day was joyful just by being on the planet on the edge of the Bay of Bengal, dancing on its lacy wave patterns on the beach, knowing something was right.
Mhm. So I'm going to just give you one little excerpt of what we did when Maharaji jowed us. I mean, we were like gopis who were missing Krishna when Maharaji wasn't there. We were kind of lovesick in a way. Looking, and part of it, it was our youth maybe that made us so ardent. So in my diary, I see that with Kabir Das and two other people, we went to the Taj Mahal, which in those days you could go inside. And we went into the Taj Mahal. We had these little folding candlestick holders. And we put an altar up to Maharaji in the Taj Mahal with little pictures. And we did arti in the Taj Mahal to our guru. And sometimes taking a train, set up an altar, in the third class train, put his picture up, put a flower. We were like trying to create that sense of love. But that was sweet. These youngsters singing arti in the Taj Mahal.
That's beautiful. Yeah. This is actually a related question because it seems like whenever we invoke beings by creating an altar and doing arti, we're creating a sacred space. So the question here is, did you feel a sense of protection while you were in Maharaji's ashram? And then the following question is, did you feel like you were in solidarity with the satsang and you were sheltered or hiding out from the noise of this world?
I never felt that I was hiding out from the world there. I mean, we were in another country. So I just felt incredibly lucky and blessed to be around Maharaji. And we felt like we were all under his blanket in that sense of protection, although at that time, India was not a place where there were dangers for us. I mean, one time, it was before I could bring Larry back to India. So I'd come back to San Francisco and we were trying to get ready to go to India. We were staying in a bus that someone had loaned us. And in my way, I had decorated and made a big altar above the driver's seat with Maharaji's picture and all. And we had taken the car to get it washed and we must have bent the exhaust pipe because while we were sleeping, the gas heater caught on fire and the bus was filled with smoke. And it felt like somebody woke me up, like a hand shook me on the shoulder and I woke up, the bus was filled with smoke. And I got Larry and I got Maharaji's picture from the altar and we escaped. And I still have the picture upstairs because it's burned down to the very top of his head. So, like, I do feel like he is always around. It doesn't mean there is not loss and suffering, but I do feel he's holding us. I should bring you that picture and show it to you because it's in the other. You look at it and it's pretty amazing, it stopped right at his hairline.
Did you consider yourselves feminists in the early 70s? I would love to hear more about having a male guru. What was it like to be women devotees with Neem Karoli Baba satsang in India in the early 70s?
Yeah, I think I thought of myself as a feminist till I got to India, and then I didn't know what I was anymore. But I had been a part of women's liberation meetings and so on, and before I left. And being with Maharaji was, well, I don't know where to start, but I just kind of fell into it, as you heard. I kind of fell off the bus and had the experience of him. He was, this might not sound convincing, but it was true. He was beyond male or female. I mean, I don't know, the state I experienced in him didn't really have to do with that. And I felt like his teaching was all very kind of universal, and it wasn't that he favored men over women or vice versa. I, was with him a number of times by myself, and he was just so sweet and so, I don't know what to say, like present, respectful, loving, caring. So those, for me during that time, those issues were just not present. But I recently came upon, when we came back, one of the first years, or couple years after we came back, Ramdas and I and a number of others taught at the first summer of Naropa, which was Chogyam Trungpa's idea to start a new kind of university. And I had come out of the university, so I was really interested in that. I thought it would be great. And but I found these notes, and I had been asked, because what we got there, and we realized that in terms of gender, it was the same old. And so some of the women asked me to run some women's groups, and I had really kind of forgotten about it, but reading these notes was very touching. There are about 200 women in the group, and they were asking questions like, why are all the holy books written by men for men? Good question. And that was absolutely true then. They were asking all the like really basic questions. When we were in India, there were, it was in the texts, and many people believed a woman cannot be enlightened. I didn't think I was trying to get enlightened anyhow, but that was a common understanding. So the seeds of all the stuff we've been through since, in these 50 years since then, were all there then, but they were really just seeds beginning. Girija?
Yeah, when I came traveling with the hog farm, which was a pretty misogynistic culture where the men, they really thought the women should like do all the cooking and the men would drive the buses. And being with Maharaji was the first time I heard the whole concept of the Divine Mother, of women as the goddess, as the mother. It was so extraordinary to me. But on the other hand, there was the Orthodox part of Hinduism. And I remember going to see Anandamoy Ma, who was a great saint, and her students were very Orthodox. And if you were a woman and you had a period, you could not go into her temple. And a lot of places were not available. And so that was the part that I really had trouble with, the Orthodox concept of women as having, being times of being impure. And how did that fit with women being the Divine Mother? So I think part of that is a reflection of the traditions in India, which have changed so much, I think, in the last few decades. I don't know if that answered the question that the person asked, but
I think so.
There were the only woman teacher that I knew in India was Anandamoy Ma, and she was amazing, and Maharaji loved her. Yeah. and we would be with her, and it was a very similar experience to being with. She was extraordinary. Yeah, and but other than that, there were very few.
Did you see her in Kankal, or were you in Brindavan that time when you saw?
I was with her a few times, and I just reread about it in my journal, but I can't remember where it happened. But there was a time when she was there. Maharaji was there also.
We would say, we'll go see Maharaji, then we'll go see Mala.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
the last time I saw her was in Delhi, and she was staying with devotees. And we took a friend of ours who was worked at CDC and was a very senior official, been visiting the smallpox program. And just on the spur of the moment, we invited him to come with us and see her. And she was hanging out the way Maharaji used to hang out with his devotees. It was so relaxed. It was so much fun. They were just being together in kind of the sea of joy. And years later, the same man told me that he had had a terrible problem with alcohol, and it was about to destroy his career. And from the day he saw Ma, he never took another drink. So,
yeah.
But she was, anyway, she was extraordinary presence.
Oh, I just remembered one time. Do you remember Papa Ramdas? He was in an ashram in the south. I forget exactly where, and I went there to visit after years later. And I remember Owen, my son, was with us, and he was about 6 or something. But we went there, and we had known some people who'd stayed there, and they were wonderful. But I remember when they were both sitting on like a tucket, and when we got there and we knelt down in front, and she looked at me. My hair used to be dark brown, but it's been cut this way since I was 4. So it's always been the same. So she looked at me, and then she just burst out laughing. I was like, oh, this is so wonderful. We were with these saintly beings. It'd be so great to be with a sainted woman teacher.
Mirabai, I just want to interrupt for 1 second.
Yeah.
You're talking about Papa Ramdas and Krishnabai, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she burst out laughing. I said, what is it? She said, your hair. She said, it looks like a hat. Because of course in India, everybody's hair is, part in the middle, and dark brown or black. That's mostly what I remember about that darshan. Your hair looks like a hat. And I could, as soon as she said it, I could imagine it from the perspective of someone who hadn't seen hair like this before. So that was a teaching.
I just want to mention, I'm so immersed in being Ramdas right now. Everything, I'm getting a good timeline of everything by reading the book. Ramdas talks about the time in Brindavan where you would go and see Maharaji and also go and see Ananda Mahima. And he felt like it was like the father and mother presence during that time. And I just want to bring up another question that's coming up, which is, Ananda Mahima recognized Siddhima when she was a young girl. She called her the great mother. She called her Durga.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
So what the story was is that Siddhima's family would go for darshan to Ananda Mahima's place up in Almora, higher up in the hills.
We lived there for a while.
Right. And there was one time when Ananda Mahima was having satsang and some devotees were singing, and Ananda Mahima was sitting with her devotees, and it was beautiful. And Siddhima was a young girl at that time. And when the devotees were singing, and they were actually singing Mirabai bhajan, I think, and she got up and spontaneously started dancing. And at the end of that satsang, Ananda Mahima got up from where the devotees were and came over to Siddhima and put her on her lap and said, "Ye to Jagat Mai hai. This is the mother of the universe." She said. So I was
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and later on, when Ma was older and got married and was living in Nainital, few houses down from K.K. Shah, Maharaji would come to K.K. Shah's house, and then they would climb up on the roof and they would go over the rooftops when they knew she was sitting out in the balcony, and just to see her. The KK was telling us this story. But why I'm bringing this up is there's a question for you, Girija. Is first, I'm not sure if you actually met Siddhima, and did you have a relationship with her over the years, and what was that like? That was a question for you.
I only met her a few times, and I was not able to develop a relationship with her that other people had. We met her once in Maharaji's temple in South India. We took our daughter there to meet her. So I met her several times, but no, there was never the occasion to make that kind of connection. And I was always touched to see how her face changed and how beautiful she became with each passing year, you know. And Ramdas had beautiful portraits of Siddhi Ma in his house. I think they made a calendar of Siddhi Ma, and he always had it on the wall. Every month was a new picture of Siddhi Ma. And I think through Ramdas's devotion and seeing those photos, I had a sense of how she was and how important she became to so many people. Exactly. Yeah, Ramdas right by his dining room table.
Yeah, I think Basu makes this for us every year. We get to see these beautiful pictures of Ma. I actually want to, because you mentioned Puri, Mirabai, I just want to show you this picture.
Oh, look, there I was. Oh, you know, this reminds me, that's a wonderful picture of her. And I was one time in Puri, sitting on the beach exactly like that, by myself, meditating. And, you know, a shawl around, whatever. And Maharaji had said to me, you will never have to worry about money. Well, that, as it turns out, hasn't been true. But and then some Indian folks were walking down the beach, and they saw me like this, and they stopped, and they put a rupee in front of me, and then they kept going. And I thought, okay, Maharaj, I get it. It was a good one. I have forgotten all about it, so I saw that picture of her. That's really great.
So you think they were making an offering to you, or that they thought?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they were treating me like a yogi, you know. I was me. And I was thinking that although she wasn't alive when we were there, that the original Mirabai was a big presence for me in India. And of course, there are temples to her, and people sing her bhajans still. And when I came back to this country, you know, a number of American poets who I had been studying when I was in graduate school, you know, Robert Bly and others, had translated her poems. And I just want to read this one. It was in my original journal. So great. It's called A Great Yogi. One night, as I sat in quiet, I seemed on the verge of entering a world inside so vast that I know it is the source of all of us. And the title is A Great Yogi.
So I just, before you start, Rabbi, I bought this picture. You see where it's going to?
Oh, here's a good one while we're on it. There's Anandamai young and Maharaji young.
I think, Girija, you earlier you mentioned, Mirabai just talked about her name. I think you had a story to share. You were there when she got her name. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I was, you know, it's interesting when I write about it, that she gave gave Linda the name Mirabai, and her husband John was upset because in historically Mirabai's real husband was jealous and was not, was problematic. But when Mirabai talks about her experience, so much had happened leading up to that moment of her preparation and practicing the song and bringing the tempura. And so there was so much fullness and detail from Mira's interior life that led to that moment where I, sitting outside, simply saw Maharaji saying, "Oh, your name is Mirabai." And for each of us, you know, we had such an interior dialogue, so much was going on. And from the outside, Maharaj would say something wouldn't mean a whole lot, but to the person he said it to, like we're saying spleen to Ramdas when he was outside thinking about his mother. So
Yeah.
each
You
of our
know,
memories are so different and so full of what we brought to be with Maharaji and what he's
yeah. I'm aware that it's
3:30.
after 6:30. Should we, in the East Coast? Should, you know, I don't want to. People might need to leave.
Okay.
But
Let me
also, what I thought was, yeah, I have a couple of things written out, if you like, and I'll send them, and you can send them to everyone who's on. You know, if you want to read more.
I'm happy to do that because the last question I was going to ask you, I know you offered your journals to Parvati when she was putting together Love Everyone. But others are asking, will you publish your journals someday? Because they're loving your stories. So we can start with you sharing with me whatever you like, and I'm happy to email everybody the stories, or I'll find a way to share it. That will work for everyone, for sure.
Great.
What is this? Would you please show the picture on the beach again? Oh,
yeah.
that's Marianne. Okay. Actually, you know, Siddhima said often about Puri, and it's a place I really want to go to because Maharaj used to go there together, and she said, you must go and have Mahaprasad. That was a big thing.
Yeah, at the temple. That's all we ate there every day. Well, but I was pregnant there and I didn't know it. And so I was really craving protein. And we were just eating rice and lentils from the temple, which is Mahaprasad, and everyone was so happy to eat it, no problem. And I used to sneak away from the others and hike down the beach to the tourist bungalow and have fish for lunch, and then go back and not tell anybody. And I thought, what is going on with you? Mahaprasad should be enough. And then I found out I was pregnant. Anyhow, there are many stories. I hope you go.
Me too. So everybody's expressing their gratitude for you both sharing your stories, and looking forward to seeing you publish whatever you might publish from your journals. This really is history in the present time. What's that, Girija?
Just thank you, Nina, for doing this. Deep bows.
Oh, Nina, you're the best. You are the best.
It is my honor that you accepted. And yes, please do share your stories. And Mirabai, if you want to just close us out for just a moment with just a 10-second meditation, and then we can close for the evening.
Sure. Okay, wherever you are, just drop into this moment, feeling yourself against the chair, your feet being held up by the earth. And just for this moment or two, bring your attention to your heart, breathing in and out of your heart, and whispering to yourself, I am loving awareness. I am loving awareness. Loving awareness. Breathing. And slowly coming back into the room and carrying that with you wherever you go from here. And sending it to Nina for being such a wonderful host.
Nice.
So much. We have so much gratitude for both of you bringing back Maharaji's prasad for all of us for all these years with all your beautiful seva. And thank you for sharing these stories with us. And please send me anything that you want to share, and I'll send it to everyone for sure.
Great. And also, my new podcast called Love, Serve, Remember on the Be Here Now network. And I will have, and Larry tells great stories about being with
Walking
Maharaji.
Each Other Home, right? It's called Walking Each Other Home.
Yeah, what did I say? Something
You said
else?
Love, Serve, Remember. So I just, yeah.
Walking Each Other Home. Thank you.
And everybody loved your John Densmore one. So we'll, next one is very brilliant,
And
right?
John Densmore talks about how he loves Maharaji. That was so cool. If you haven't seen it yet, you can see as well as listen to John Densmore, the divine drummer for the Doors, who broke on through to the other side. Okay.
Yeah, he played with us in Maui. Do you remember that year he came?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you all.
Wow.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.
Serena.
Thank you.
Ram Ram.
Debbie. Wow. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
This was beautiful. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks a lot. How do you?
Oh, I saw you were on. Great.
Yeah. Hi.
Thank you, beloveds. Ram Ram.
Ram.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Oh, wow.
Oh, Janaki.
Oh, boy.
Will we be able to view this again?
Yes, I'm going to send an email to everyone on the list with a replay link. And you can share that with whoever who might not have been here too. And that'll come in a couple of days because I just have to edit the video and get the stuff from Mirabai, and I'll send it all at once to everyone.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you.
Oh, boy, thank you all for being here. It's so great. Really great.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Mirabai, Girija. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun to do. I would like to do this every day.
Yes.
Yes, please do.
We'll come. If you do it every day, I know we'll come. Right, Nina?
Yes, Mirabai.
I'll be there.
I wondered if you loved that Ramdas story about we're bums.
Of course. I loved all of them. And you.
Okay. I'm going to
Hi, Krishna.
have dinner. Hi, Krishna.
Hi, Krishna.
Sorry, Krishna.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Going for dinner.
Yes.
Love you all.
You too. Have a good night. Ram Ram, Sita Ram.
Thank you. Ram Ram.
Ram.